Justin Trudeau is in the news for trying to censor the internet, for angering major world economies, and even for hosting Nazis. Canadians who just want to be left alone and who are tired of Trudeau's tactics think that he may have reached the end, but I'm not so sure. I'm going to share a news article with you in a minute, but here's why I'm not so sure that Trudeau will go. Because even if Trudeau himself goes, the people who wanted Trudeau in the first place aren't going to go. They'll still be Canadian and they'll still be involved in the political process. And we've told you for a while now that a lot of Canadians like what he's doing. One of the big things that I think we have to understand as people who want to be free, people who want to achieve success and be proud of that, we were always the minority, and that majority is increasingly angry at us. And so maybe none of your friends like Justin Trudeau, but obviously somebody likes the guy. And even if they don't like his personality, they probably like a lot of what he stands for. So here is the free press for a free people. Justin Trudeau's self-immolation. And it says the Canadian Prime Minister has alienated the largest democracy on earth, that's India, and played host to a former Nazi. That was just this week, says Arupa Subramania. Dateline Ottawa. In the span of 5 days, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has managed to alienate the government of the largest democracy on earth, anger key allies from Washington, D.C. to Canberra, and outrage Jews around the world. Now the promise of Trudeau, the young, strapping progressive born into political royalty. When has that ever gone wrong? With his ostensibly forward-looking ideas about medically assisted suicide, puberty blockers, and the suspension of truckers' civil liberties, is on the brink of imploding. Limousines clustered around Parliament as senior officials from Trudeau's Liberal Party feverishly debated how to right the ship recently and save the Prime Minister. That emergency powwow took place 4 days after Canada's Parliament honored 98-year-old Ukrainian Yaroslav Hunka. The Speaker of the House of Commons, Anthony Rota, introduced Hunka as a Ukrainian hero and a Canadian hero who fought against the Soviet Union during World War II. The whole of Parliament rose to give him a standing ovation. But it later emerged that Hunka did indeed fight the Soviets, or as Rota put it, the Russians, but alongside the Nazis. Hunka's appearance came as part of Ukrainian President Zelensky of Ukraine's trip to Canada, where he hoped to bolster support for the war against Russia. Zelensky seemed unfazed by Parliament's honoring Hunka, giving a fist bump in support, even though he's Jewish and lost family in the Holocaust. The president said his great-grandparents were murdered, but the Nazis burned down their village. No, I'm not going to subscribe now. Sorry, free press. But back to business. Everyone felt pretty horrified afterwards. And Rota apologized, and then out he went, resigned. Trudeau refused to accept blame. Now, that doesn't sound like the Justin Trudeau that I know. Instead, he sought to link the controversy to Russia's disinformation campaign. That's their thing. And listen, no doubt that certain countries have disinformation campaigns, although what I find interesting is been going down a rabbit hole recently with guys like Johnny Harris. I'm sure we don't agree on everything here on YouTube. U.S. and other countries in Five Eyes, they run plenty of disinformation campaigns on their own. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you want to demand ethics of people, only to be ethical yourself and not just be like, it's good when we do it, but not when they do it. This is why the world is becoming multipolar, by the way, and why I believe having a second passport is so important. And having a third passport, if your second passport is kind of too much like the first one, because the world's getting tired of this stuff. And the fact that the US and Canada and Australia just get to get away with it, and everyone else is held to account when they do the same stuff. Little sidebar there. Trudeau refused to accept blame. Instead, he sought to link the controversy to Russia's disinformation campaign against Ukraine, while acknowledging that the Hunka affair was deeply embarrassing. I think that's what they teach you in political school. To Parliament, the leader of which is Justin Trudeau. Then Trudeau gave a short speech in which he blamed Rhoda for this horrendous violation, which he noted hurt Jewish people as well as Polish people, Roma people, 2S LGBTQIA plus people, disabled people, or racialized people. That debacle is competing for headline space with Trudeau's other recent catastrophe, his decision to blame India for an extrajudicial murder on Canadian soil. That happened on the first day of the fall session of the Canadian legislature after a long summer recess. He wasted no time getting right into it. Trudeau declared that agents of the government of India were behind the recent murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in a Vancouver suburb, who was a Sikh plumber, had been born in India, immigrated to Canada, gained Canadian citizenship, was a vocal advocate for Sikh autonomy, the Khalistan movement, basically, which seeks an independent Sikh state, northwestern India, in the province of Punjab. And so anyway, India says, how dare you? And we can go on and on and on. What I take from this, besides the fact that, yes, a lot of Canadians are fed up with Justin Trudeau, but I don't think they're fed up with the actual policies. I don't think that they're fed up with the progressivism. I don't think that they would have done things differently in the last 5 years. I don't think human beings in general learn lessons. Like, history repeats itself. For a reason. People don't learn it. They don't stop it. They think this time is different. They think it can't happen here. Let's be honest. There are people watching this who are like, yeah, it can't happen here. And then they'll beat the drum every day for how bad Trudeau is. Like, bad things are happening where you live. Your taxes are through the roof. Your freedoms are going in the wrong direction. Your country's not as safe. Like, just bad things are happening. When do we just call it enough? The answer is not just, when Trudeau goes, it's going to be perfection again. And so the article goes on and on and on. What I find interesting is how many years ago would it have been like, who cares what India says? And to some extent, people there are still, saying that. But these countries that are not part of the international community Justin Trudeau talks about are increasingly gaining economic might, geopolitical might. I mean, India is having an influence in a number of countries, even in Africa, I think, but it's certainly around Asia. They're doing a miniature version of what China's doing. China's going around and talking to countries in Latin America and Africa and saying, you don't have to choose. You can still trade with the U.S., but we want to be your biggest partner. Whereas the U.S. comes in, and I think Canada kind of follows suit in some regard, and they say, listen, only do business with us. And for a country like the U.S. that says, America first, well, why wouldn't every other country say, our country first? Why would they just say, if we want to work with the U.S. in any way, they have to be our only partner and we'll lose the money from all the other people? The world is really becoming multipolar where there are other options outside of this international community. Western Europe, the U.S., Canada, Australia, birds of a feather are going to flock together. And if you're just watching, CBC, you're just going to see only news about that. You're maybe going to occasionally see something about how there was a flood or a bus drove over a mountain or something in some foreign land. But the reality is those foreign lands you hear so little about, the ones that Justin Trudeau is apparently going around ticking off, offer opportunities. If you're Canadian, you want to have a second passport because guys to the left of Justin Trudeau, and maybe eventually someone like Justin Trudeau will be convinced to, go to the left. They want to tax you on your worldwide income, not because you live there, but because you have a passport. And they want to raise your taxes even more because you're not paying your fair share. And so what happens when they raise your taxes and you want to leave and they're like, you know what? We're going to make it hard for you to leave. We're going to impose U.S.-style citizenship-based taxation. By the way, the same system that allowed the U.S. to continue to do that, to tax their citizens no matter where they live. The United Nations censured the nation of Eritrea, African country of Eritrea, which charges a single-digit percentage tax, a diaspora tax to Eritreans who live overseas. Canada and others joined in censuring them in the UN for their crimes against humanity, basically, while endorsing and complying with the US's exact same policy, but actually much, much worse because it's not just single digits. What happens when Canada says, you know what, we're broke, let's do the same thing because it's, social justice. If you're Canadian, you have to pay the price. That's increasingly the mantra from the people who want socialism in a country like Canada is they're angry that they don't have as easy of a life as they would have 50 years ago. They're angry that countries like India have a little bit more presence now, and people are getting higher paid jobs there, and that means they actually have to compete. Canada's pitch to Amazon for the Amazon HQ was, we have cheaper software engineers in the US. To which people in India were like, yeah, we have even cheaper engineers. Like, just if we're just looking for like lower prices, like just come here. And it's just like, these people who are upset, they want you to pay more. And to them, it's like being part of the Canadian family comes at a price. It's transactional. And I've said this for 20 years since I was a kid. When people start to feel the pinch, which Westerners never thought they would, when they start to feel the pinch, they're going to lash at anybody. Oil's too high, go bomb some Middle Eastern country. What do we care? We got to get gas prices down. Rent's too high, you should have to pay a fee for being Canadian. If you don't live here and use our roads and schools, that was 10 years ago's argument. So to me, that's what's coming whether Justin Trudeau stays or not. This is not going to embarrass the idea of progressivism. This is not going to change people's opinion that the rent is too damn high, or that response to a pandemic was what it should have been, or that, the whole kind of Western, like, we're too rich for our own good, even though we're really not that rich anymore, and we kind of have to focus on like the for the children kind of arguments. Maybe Trudeau goes. Let's not celebrate too quickly if we're Canadian that solves all the problems, because that systemic issue that brought him into power is still there. You can read this article in the Free Press, talks about all the scandals which he's survived. People seem to be sympathetic to what he does. Maybe there's a line to that. The next guy will come in, and even if there's a break with some conservative for a while, but ultimately the direction of Canada is fewer freedoms, crack down on dissent, control what you listen to, and against people who start businesses and have investments. And so I wouldn't play the, I'll leave when it gets bad enough idea. If I'm Canadian, let me go back to the point. If I'm Canadian, I want a passport that's different. If you can get citizenship by descent through your family tree and you're entitled to an Irish passport or an Italian passport or a Hungarian passport, do it. But get something that's different, because the world is becoming multipolar, and you don't want to be entirely plugged into Justin Trudeau's international community, and all these other countries that are heading in the right direction leave you behind.